very warm welcome to you. Now, after more than 4 days of intense negotiations in Geneva, Iran has reached an interim agreement with world powers over its nuclear program. Well, President Obama says the West has secured substantial limitations to prevent Iran from building a nuclear weapon. But not everyone's happy. Israel has described the deal as an historic mistake. Well, in just a moment, we'll be speaking to the Israeli ambassador to London. But first, our Middle East editor, Jeremy Byrne, reports from Geneva. Well, with me now is Israel's ambassador to the UK, Daniel Taub. Many thanks for joining us here on the programme. I spoke to the Israeli government spokesman earlier, Mark Fitzpatrick, who explained that what Israel had wanted from these talks was for Tehran to cease all uranium enrichment. But that was never on the table. So what was Israel realistically wanting out of Geneva?
Well, we actually want what the Western governments, including the government of Britain, says that they want. We want to make sure that Iran does not have the capability of achieving a military nuclear weapon. And we're not against the idea of an agreement, of course. You know, given the alternatives, which are either Iran with a bomb or bombing Iran, an agreement which is effective, which is robust, which is verifiable, is clearly the best option. Our concern is that this agreement doesn't meet those standards. It doesn't stop Iran. It doesn't require it to dismantle a single centrifuge. It doesn't require it to dismantle the plutonium heavy water reactor in Iraq. It doesn't require it to do anything in relation to the military aspects of its program. And it doesn't stop it from enriching either. And so this is to use this as a basis for releasing some of those sanctions that took us such a long time, that Britain worked so hard to put together, seems a little bit, moving ahead too quickly.
And yet other experts that we've spoken to on this topic have said that they've been surprised by how far this agreement has gone, how many concessions Tehran has made. These very intrusive verifications, daily inspection access to key sites and access to workshops that go far beyond normal IAEA rules. They are actually surprised by how far Tehran went on this negotiation table.
I think if you look a little bit closer at some of those so-called concessions, they're not actually concessions after all. I mean, the fact is they talk about the fact that Iran has agreed to stop enriching to 20%, but that's something that Iran stopped doing a long time ago. And with its new advanced centrifuges, it doesn't even need to do that in order to get to a bomb. The fact that they've agreed not to operate the Iraq heavy water plutonium reactor in the next 6 months, that's not something that's even a possibility. So we are very, very concerned that some things that are being presented as concessions actually aren't concessions at all.
But does Israel not agree that diplomacy, that concessions on either side, that talking to Tehran, is that not better than the standoff that Israel seems determined to maintain on this issue?
Well, again, here what we've said is really what the Americans have said all along, which is that, we want a deal, but a bad deal here is going to be worse than no deal at all. We are concerned in particular because we're looking, the world is looking at what Iran might do in the future. But we're very focused on what Iran is actually doing in the present. And even with the so-called moderate new phase, we see that it's still supporting the most heinous terrorist regimes in the region. It's supporting President Assad of Egypt with his use of chemical weapons. It's supporting Hezbollah which is vicious terrorist attacks. And all of that is with the capabilities that it has at the moment. So we have to be very, very realistic about where we could be with Iran in the future.
Is Israel not concerned that it's alienating itself from the international community, that it could be seen as a blocking force in these negotiations?
I don't think so. I mean, one of the things that's very striking is that in our concerns about this agreement, not only every part of Israel's very broad political spectrum is expressing very similar concerns, but many, many countries, our Arab neighbors of the region, including almost all of those that are bordering Iran, are actually broadcasting exactly the same concerns that we have. The people that know how Iran has behaved in the past, how it has continually been duplicitous, how again, despite inspections, it has engaged in programs that have been beneath the surface, are very concerned about that.
All other international forces that have an interest in these talks have voiced very positive noises out of these discussions from Geneva, apart from Israel and Saudi Arabia, who remains, to quote one source, conspicuously silent on the topic.
Look, I think everybody wants, an agreement to work, but we do have concerns about this agreement. Your correspondent, Jeremy Bowen, just reported that less than 24 hours after the agreement was signed, we already have a fundamental disagreement over whether it includes or doesn't include a right for Iran to carry on enriching. And that's before we've got to the challenges of actually trying to implement it in practice. So it looks like this is an agreement that's going to have a very hard time.
So where does Israel go from here?
I think we remain with our position, which is actually the same position that's been expressed by Prime Minister Cameron, by other leaders, that we cannot afford a situation where we start an Arab nuclear arms race in the Middle East, where we actually have the Iranian hegemony, where we have that wind in the sails of terrorist organizations. We simply cannot afford to allow Iran to get a nuclear military capability, and we'll have to do everything we can in order to stop that.
Ambassador Daniel Taub, many thanks for coming in and talking to us. Well, in return, Iran will receive no new nuclear-related sanctions for 6 months and will also receive sanctions relief worth around $7 billion. Well, let's talk now to Mark Fitzpatrick, the director of the Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Programme at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, a think tank based here in London. Many thanks for joining us here on the programme. Sure. What do you make of this deal? Is it a good one?
This is a good deal. This deal goes beyond what I expected. It's got more intrusive verifications than I realized, including daily inspection access to the key sites and access to workshops that produce centrifuge machines that is not required under the normal IEA rules. And the sanctions relief is only $7 billion. Meanwhile, Iran will continue to lose $15 billion of lost oil sales that won't be lifted during this interim period. So Iran is celebrating this, but Iran actually made the most concessions.
Were you surprised by the number of concessions that Tehran actually agreed to?
I was. I mean, I thought they were going to happen eventually, but the fact that the final deal does not say the right to enrichment. This has been a sticking point for years and years, and that Iran has agreed to stop construction of the Arak reactor, one of the points that France had made in the last round at the last minute. This deal is strengthened because of France's intervention the last time, and I think the world should be happy about it.
And yet one crucial player is not very happy about it at all. Israel, they've described this as an historic mistake.
Well, you know, what Israel wanted was not in the cards. They wanted a dismantlement of Iran's program. They wanted an end to enrichment. Anybody who knows anything about the Iranian psyche knows that that wasn't going to happen. Iran wasn't going to completely capitulate. But Iran did make a lot of concessions, and the program is now frozen. If this deal had not been agreed to, Iran's program would be continuing to the point where it really would cast a nuclear shadow on Israel. That shadow is now it's put off into the future. Israel is better off. Its national security is improved because of this deal.
Okay, Mark Fitzpatrick, many thanks for your analysis on this. Now, more than 11,000 children have died in the Syrian conflict in nearly 3 years, including hundreds deliberately targeted by snipers. The BBC has obtained a copy of the first large-scale examination of the way Syrian children are being killed there. Well, the research carried out by the Oxford Research Group looked at casualty figures between March of 2011 and August of this year. Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, has the details. And just a warning for you, her report does contain some pictures that viewers may find disturbing.